Imagine standing at the edge of everything you've ever built. 18 major championships, 5 Masters titles, a comeback so miraculous that doctors once told you your playing days were finished. You've survived car crashes, surgeries, personal scandal, public humiliation, and you clawed your way back every single time. You are Tiger Woods. And you have never, not once in your entire career, let anyone tell you what golf should be. Now picture this. It's a quiet Tuesday morning. No tournament. No cameras on the course. But inside the walls of the PGA Tour's headquarters in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, a decision has just been made. A decision so stunning, so seismic, that it will ripple through every locker room, every boardroom, and every living room where someone has ever gripped a club and dreamed of greatness. Word leaks out slowly at first, a whisper here, a text message there. Then it explodes. And somewhere, in a room most of us will never see, Tiger Woods reads the news. His jaw tightens. His eyes narrow. And for a moment, just one long, electric moment, the greatest golfer who ever lived does something almost no one expected. He reacts. Publicly. Passionately. And the golf world holds its breath. This is that story. If you followed golf for any stretch of time, you know that the PGA Tour does not make decisions lightly. This is an institution built on tradition, on prestige, on the quiet understanding that professional golf operates by its own unspoken rules. But over the last 3 years, that institution has been shaken to its foundation in a way that nobody, not the commissioners, not the sponsors, not even the players, fully anticipated. And to understand why Tiger's reaction landed like a thunderclap, you have to go back to where the storm actually started. It started with money. It almost always does. When LIV Golf burst onto the scene backed by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, it didn't just offer players bigger paychecks. It offered them something more dangerous, leverage. For the first time in generations, the PGA Tour's top talent had somewhere else to go. Phil Mickelson went. Dustin Johnson went. Brooks Koepka went. Bryson DeChambeau went. One by one, names that had defined the modern era of professional golf packed their bags and walked away from the institution that had made them household names. And the PGA Tour, for all its power and prestige, looked on in stunned, almost paralyzed disbelief. Think about what that must have felt like for Tiger. Because you have to understand, Tiger Woods is not just a golfer. He is the PGA Tour. His face, his name, his brand, his story, it is inseparable from the organization he has represented since he turned professional in 1996. When Tiger played, ratings doubled. Sponsorship deals multiplied. Entire television networks restructured their weekend schedules around whether or not Tiger was in contention on a Sunday afternoon. The PGA Tour owes a debt to Tiger Woods that cannot be calculated in dollars, and Tiger knows it. Which means when the tour makes a major move, Tiger's voice carries a weight that no other player's does, or perhaps ever will again. If you've ever believed that one person can genuinely change the direction of something much bigger than themselves, drop a comment below, because that's exactly the kind of story we're about to unpack. Now here's where the story gets genuinely complicated. Because the PGA Tour's latest decision wasn't made in isolation. It was made in the context of a negotiation that has been grinding forward, slowly, painfully, sometimes publicly, for the better part of 2 years. You may have heard about the framework agreement, the tentative deal, the merger that wasn't quite a merger, the partnership that nobody could quite define. At its heart, the question was simple and yet almost impossible to answer. Could the PGA Tour and the Saudi-backed golf empire find common ground? Could two organizations that had spent millions of dollars and enormous reserves of public goodwill attacking each other suddenly sit down at the same table and build something together? The early signs were not encouraging. When the framework agreement was first announced in June of 2023, the reaction inside the golf world was something close to shock. Players who had stayed loyal to the PGA Tour, who had turned down staggering sums of LIV money, felt betrayed. They had been told, in no uncertain terms, that LIV Golf was the enemy, that defectors were traitors to the sport, that the integrity of professional golf depended on the tour holding the line. And then, almost overnight, the tour's leadership seemed to pivot entirely. The enemy was suddenly a potential partner. The betrayal, for those loyal players, felt real and raw. Tiger, to his credit, had always been measured in his public statements. He is not a man who fires off impulsive takes. He thinks. He weighs. He considers the full board before he moves. But privately, and this has been confirmed by people close to him, he was deeply uncomfortable with the direction things were heading. Not because he opposed change in principle. Tiger Woods has never been afraid of change. He reinvented his swing 4 separate times during his career. He rebuilt his entire physical body after injuries that would have ended lesser athletes. Change, for Tiger, is not the enemy. But this felt different. This felt like something was being decided without the players who mattered most having a genuine seat at the table. The specific decision that broke everything open came after months of stalled negotiations, missed deadlines, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering that would have felt at home in a political thriller. The PGA Tour's board of directors, under enormous financial pressure and facing the very real possibility that more top players would continue defecting, moved forward with a structural framework that fundamentally altered how the tour would operate going forward. Details were announced, some anticipated, some entirely unexpected, and the reaction from the player community was immediate and fierce. Sources inside the locker room described the atmosphere as electric with tension. Players who had publicly supported the tour's position felt blindsided. Those who had been privately skeptical felt vindicated in the worst possible way. And somewhere in the middle of all this, Tiger Woods, who had been serving in a player advisory capacity, who had been one of the most visible faces of the tour's resistance to LIV, found himself in an extraordinarily difficult position. He had put his reputation on the line. He had encouraged others to stay loyal. And now he was looking at a landscape that had shifted beneath his feet without adequate warning. There's something almost heartbreaking about that image, isn't there? A man who has given everything to a sport, who has carried its weight on his shoulders through the worst years of his personal and physical life, suddenly questioning whether the institution he defended so fiercely actually deserved that defense. Whatever you think about the politics of all this, and reasonable people genuinely disagree, that moment of doubt in a champion's eyes hits different. It just does. Tiger's public reaction came in stages, which is entirely consistent with who he is as a person. He is not impulsive. He does not grandstand. The first signal came through a statement, carefully worded, reviewed by advisors, measured in every syllable, that nonetheless carried unmistakable weight. He expressed that he had concerns, that the process had not been as inclusive as it should have been, that players, specifically the top players whose participation gives the tour its value, deserved more transparency and more genuine input into decisions of this magnitude. To casual observers, those words might have sounded polite, diplomatic even, but to anyone who knows Tiger, to anyone who has watched him operate across nearly 3 decades at the absolute pinnacle of professional sport, those words were the equivalent of a thunderstorm warning. When Tiger Woods says he has concerns, you listen. Because what he means, what everyone in that ecosystem understood him to mean, is that something has gone seriously wrong, and he is not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of institutional comfort. The golf media, understandably, lost its collective mind. Every major outlet scrambled to contextualize what Tiger's statement meant for the negotiations, for the tour's leadership, for the broader battle over the future of professional golf. Was this the beginning of a more open rebellion from within? Were other top players preparing to follow Tiger's lead and voice their own frustrations? Was the tour's leadership, already under pressure from multiple directions, about to face an internal crisis on top of everything else? What made Tiger's position uniquely powerful and uniquely complicated was the timing. Because this wasn't happening in a vacuum. This was happening while Tiger himself was fighting a battle on a different front entirely, the battle to return to competitive golf. His injuries, particularly the devastating leg damage from his 2021 car accident, have never fully healed in the way that would allow him to compete at the level his own standards demand. There are good weeks and bad weeks. Weeks where he moves with something close to his old fluidity, and weeks where every step is a negotiation between will and physical limitation. The people closest to Tiger describe a man who is deeply unwilling to accept the idea that his competitive career might be over. Not unwilling in a delusional sense. Tiger is one of the most clear-eyed competitors who has ever lived. But unwilling in the sense that he believes, genuinely and deeply, that he has something left to offer the game he has given his life to. And that belief makes the current situation with the tour even more charged. Because if Tiger's playing days are genuinely winding down, then his voice as a player administrator, as a bridge between the locker room and the boardroom, becomes his primary vehicle for shaping the sport's future. And that vehicle just hit a very significant bump in the road. Now let's talk about what this decision actually means for the tour going forward, because the human drama of Tiger's reaction only makes sense against the backdrop of what's actually at stake. Professional golf is in the middle of a generational transformation. The economics of the sport have been fundamentally disrupted. The old model, in which the PGA Tour held an effective monopoly on the world's top players, distributed prize money according to its own formulas, and operated largely on its own terms, that model is gone. It's not coming back. The question is not whether golf changes. The question is who controls the change and who benefits from it. The Saudi investment that funds LIV Golf is not going away. The Public Investment Fund has the resources to sustain a competing tour indefinitely, regardless of whether it turns a profit in the near term. That is a geopolitical and financial reality that the PGA Tour cannot wish away. And so the tour's leadership faces a genuinely agonizing choice. Negotiate a coexistence that preserves as much of its autonomy and integrity as possible, or continue fighting a war of attrition that it may not be able to win. Neither option is clean. Neither option is without significant costs. And this is where Tiger's voice matters so profoundly, not just symbolically, but practically. Because the deal that eventually gets made will shape professional golf for the next 20, 30, perhaps 50 years. The prize money structures, the scheduling, the ranking systems, the television contracts, the entry requirements, all of it flows from whatever agreement is ultimately reached. And if that agreement is made without genuine input from the players who define the sport's value, then whatever is built will have a fracture running through its foundation from day one. Where do you stand on this? Seriously, because this is one of those moments where there isn't a clean answer and the golf world is genuinely divided. The debate happening in locker rooms right now is happening in living rooms too. Behind the scenes, there is reportedly a significant divide within the player community itself. It would be too simple to frame this as loyalists versus defectors or traditionalists versus progressives. The reality is more textured than that. There are players who stayed on the PGA Tour and privately believe the tour should have compromised sooner, before the talent drain became so severe. There are players who left for LIV and quietly wonder whether they made the right long-term career decision. There are young players, just entering their prime years, who are watching all of this with a mixture of anxiety and opportunity, understanding that whatever structure emerges from this negotiation will define the entire arc of their professional lives. Tiger sits at the center of all these competing currents. He represents the tour's past in the most literal sense. He is its greatest champion, its defining figure. But he also understands the future in a way that few others do, because he has spent years building his own business interests, his own understanding of sports economics, his own network of relationships that extends far beyond the fairways. He is not a figure of pure nostalgia. He is a man who thinks several moves ahead. And what he sees ahead, from everything that has been reported, is a landscape that could either be enormously exciting or deeply troubling, depending entirely on how the next few decisions are made. There's a detail from this story that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention, and it speaks to something important about Tiger's character. In the days after his public statement, as the media storm swirled and speculation ran wild, Tiger appeared at a golf event, not as a competitor, but as a presence, an ambassador. And people who were there describe him moving through the space with the same quiet authority he has always carried, signing autographs, talking to young players, engaging with fans who had waited hours just to be in the same space as him. He did not look like a man in crisis. He looked like a man who had said what needed to be said and was now getting on with the business of being Tiger Woods. There is something almost profound about that, the ability to speak hard truths publicly and then return to yourself with complete composure. It is a kind of emotional discipline that most people spend their entire lives trying to develop, and Tiger has had it since he was old enough to hold a club. That image, Tiger moving through a crowd, unhurried and undiminished, even as the institution he helped build navigates its most turbulent moment. That image says something that no press release or carefully worded statement can quite capture. It says that he is still here, still invested, still fighting, in his own way, for a version of this sport that reflects the values he has always believed it should stand for. And if you've ever supported someone who kept showing up even when the system around them wasn't working the way it should, you already understand exactly what that image means. The broader context of all this is worth pausing on, because it's easy to get lost in the immediate drama and miss the larger picture. Professional golf is experiencing something that virtually every major sport has experienced at some point in its history: a fundamental renegotiation of the relationship between the institution that governs the sport and the athletes who give it meaning. It happened in basketball. It happened in baseball. It happened, in a different way, in tennis. In every case, the transition was painful and messy and produced genuine injustices on multiple sides. In every case, the sport eventually found a new equilibrium, one that was different from what came before, but not necessarily worse. Golf will find that equilibrium too. The question is simply how long the turbulence lasts and how much damage gets done during the transition. Tiger's intervention, his willingness to use his voice at this particular moment, in this particular way, is one of the most significant attempts to accelerate that process and steer it toward an outcome that serves the game's long-term health rather than any single party's short-term interests. Whether it works remains to be seen. The forces at play here are enormous: financial, geopolitical, institutional, and no single voice, however iconic, can control them entirely. But the attempt matters. The clarity matters. The refusal to stay silent when silence would have been so much easier, that matters most of all. Here is what we know for certain, as of right now. The PGA Tour is at an inflection point unlike any it has faced in its modern history. The decision that triggered Tiger's reaction has set in motion a series of events whose full implications will take months, perhaps years, to fully understand. Negotiations continue. Positions are shifting. New information continues to emerge, almost daily, about the structure of potential deals and the depth of disagreements between parties. What we also know is that Tiger Woods, despite his physical limitations, despite the uncertainty surrounding his return to competitive play, despite everything, remains the most consequential figure in this sport. Not because of nostalgia, not because of sentiment, but because when Tiger speaks, the golf world listens. Full stop. Players listen. Sponsors listen. Television executives listen. And perhaps most importantly, the fans listen. The tens of millions of people around the world who fell in love with this game in no small part because of what Tiger Woods made it feel like. They are listening too. And what Tiger is telling them right now, beneath all the careful language and strategic positioning, is this: the game matters. The integrity of competition matters. The players matter. Don't let anyone build a future for this sport that forgets those things. There is one more dimension to this story that deserves to be told, and it is perhaps the most human dimension of all. Tiger Woods is 49 years old. He has undergone more than a dozen surgical procedures. He has rebuilt himself from circumstances that would have broken almost any other athlete on earth. And he is still fighting for this game. Not for money, not for trophies, though he has more than almost anyone alive. Not for legacy, which is already so secure that no controversy could meaningfully diminish it. He is fighting because golf is what he is. It is not something he does. It is the lens through which he has seen the entire world since he was 2 years old, swinging a club in his father's garage in Cypress, California. The courses, the competition, the culture, the community, it is his native language. And when something threatens that language, when something threatens the integrity of the world that gave him everything and to which he has given so much in return, he cannot stay quiet. He is constitutionally incapable of it. That is the Tiger Woods that the PGA Tour is dealing with right now. Not the smiling brand ambassador. Not the carefully managed public figure. The competitor. The protector. The man who, even now, even with everything he has been through, refuses to accept a version of this sport that falls short of what he knows it can be. Oh, where does this leave us? In truth, in a place of genuine uncertainty, which is uncomfortable, but also honest. The negotiations will continue. More decisions will be made. More reactions will follow. The story of professional golf's future is still being written, one difficult conversation at a time. But here is what is not uncertain. Tiger Woods has reminded everyone, the tour, the players, the fans, the investors, the media, that the soul of this sport is not a line item in a balance sheet. It is not a negotiating chip. It is something that has to be actively protected every single day by the people who love it enough to fight for it. If this story moved you, if you believe that the voices of those who actually play the game should shape its future, then this channel exists for exactly that reason. We tell the stories behind the headlines, the human stories, the ones that matter long after the news cycle moves on. If that's the kind of storytelling you want to be part of, you already know what to do. The game goes on, and so does Tiger Woods.